The Wooden Horse. The Wooden Horse and Pandora's Box. By Geraldine McCaughrean, illustrated by Tony Ross. There was once a woman who hatched from an egg, like a bird. But she was more beautiful than any bird who ever flew. She was called Helen, and there was not a prince, nor a duke, nor a king who did not want to win her. But she married old King Menelaus and lived in a palace on the shores of his kingdom. If only that had put an end to the hopes of all the other princes, dukes and kings. Young, handsome Paris, Prince of Troy, found Helen too beautiful to forget and wanted too much to have her for his own. So he stole Helen's love and ran away with her to Troy, the city called the City of Horses. King Menelaus grieved, but his grief then turned to anger and, calling together an army of 50,000 men, he sailed for Troy to get back his wife. He took with him the greatest heroes of the world, Achilles the brave, Odysseus the cunning, and Ajax the proud. 1,000 ships put ashore outside the tall white walls of Troy. Helen looked out of her palace window and saw the fleet approaching. What will happen now? She wondered. Who will win me? Which side do I want to win? For weeks, for months, for years the Greeks lay siege to the city. The great heroes of Troy fought in single combat with the great heroes of Greece, sword against sword, chariot against chariot. But it decided nothing. After 10 years, Achilles the brave was dead. Ajax the proud lay in a grave covered with flowers. And Paris was dead and his lips too cold for kissing. So many good men had been killed. And those who had lived were sadder, wearier, older. Only Helen remained as lovely as ever, a precious prize locked inside Troy. At last Odysseus the cunning spoke up. I think I know how we can get inside the city of Troy. The Greeks listened eagerly. It'll never work, said some. It's too dangerous, said others. But old King Menelaus nodded and said, Do it, Odysseus. For days the Trojans, inside their walls, could hear nothing but sawing and hammering. Then one morning they looked over their high walls and saw a horse. A huge wooden horse. They also saw that the Greeks had packed up their tents, launched their ships and set sail. They've gone! They've gone, cheered the Trojans. We've won the war! But what's this they've left behind? A horse? They crept outside to look. It's a tribute to Troy, said some. A tribute to the city of horses. It's a trick, said others. One man threw a spear at the wooden horse and it struck with a hollow thud. Beware of Greeks even when they give you presents, he warned. But the people of Troy would not listen. Don't be so dismal. The war's over, the Greeks have gone, haven't they? They began to celebrate, to drink wine and to dance. And they towed the huge wooden horse, on long ropes, in through the gates of Troy. Meanwhile, inside the horse's hollow body, a dozen Greek soldiers crouched as still as stones. There was so little room in their hiding place that they were all pressed together, knee against knee, elbow against ear. Heave, cried the Trojans, as they pulled the giant horse into the city square. The bumpy ride fogged and bruised the men hidden inside, but they held their breath and gripped their swords tight. One sneeze and they would be found out. Helen looked out of her window and saw the horse, all decorated now with flowers and ribbons. She was a Greek and knew the ways of the Greeks, and she thought to herself, this is a trick. She turned away from the window, put a finger to her lips and sat quite still waiting. The happy Trojans danced all day round the long legs of the wooden horse. At last, weary with joy, they tottered home to sleep, and the city fell silent. Then a secret door creaked open in the stomach of the horse. Down dropped a knotted rope. Down the rope climbed the dozen Greeks. Meanwhile, the whole Greek fleet of ships sailed back to shore, they had only been hiding over the sea's horizon, waiting. As they pelted up the beach, they peered through the early morning darkness at the high, heavy city gates, anxious to see whether their plan had succeeded. And there! The gates creaked open to let them in, and the Greeks dashed through, swords at the ready. A war that had lasted 10 years was over. They set light to Troy's tall buildings. They killed Troy's young men. Then they seized Helen and sailed away. By morning there was nothing but the sound of weeping within Troy's charred and crumbling walls. And Helen lived once more in the palace of King Menelaus on the shores of his kingdom. If she had loved Paris once, she never said so, and never spoke his name, and she and Menelaus